Hi, this is Naomi with Sword and Steel, Drukhari style, and today we're going to be learning about fighting in hand-to-hand combat in Warhammer 40,000 10th edition. I hope you enjoy. So we have learned the movement phase, the shooting phase, and the charge phase, and are ready to move on to hand combat in the fight phase. In this phase are two parts. The first part is the fight first step, where everyone who has or received the ability fights first get to make their attacks, starting with a player whose turn is not taking place, and alternating between your units and your opponent units until every unit that can fight in the fight's first step has done so. Unlike when you are shooting, where you can pick and choose whom to shoot with, you do not get to decide which units will fight. If they are eligible to fight, they must do so, though more often than not, only charging units will attack during this particular fight first step, so it won't be uncommon for the player whose turn is not taking place to not have any units to attack with at this time. And then, when everyone in the fight's first step has fought, we have the remaining combat step, where everyone else gets to attack. And that includes anyone who had the fight first ability during the fight first step but was ineligible, but due to rearranging models have since become eligible. And in this step as well, the player whose turn is not taking place gets to choose first the unit they want to fight with. Now, to fight with a unit, there's a sequence to follow. First, you select an eligible unit. A unit is eligible to fight if either or both of these conditions are met. Either the unit is within engagement range of any enemy units, or the unit has charged that turn. Once you've selected the unit, you can pile in. To pile in, move every model in that unit that isn't already base to base within an enemy model up to 3 inches, so that they end within engagement range of any enemy units while still maintaining their unit coherency. Models piling in have to move closer to the enemy model that is closest to them already, and if it can, the model must end in base-to-base contact with that enemy. Even if not all of your models can end in base-to-base contact with enemy models, try to get within engagement range, or within base-to-base contact with models of your own that are already base-to-base with an enemy, because that will allow them to fight as well. After you have piled in, you can start making your melee attacks. And I do say melee, I know it's melee. First, determine which models can attack. They have to be either within engagement range of an enemy unit or base-to-base contact with another model in their unit that is itself in base-to-base contact with an enemy unit. Then, choose which melee weapon you would like to attack with. In many cases, there will be only one option, but if they have more than one option, you have to declare which weapon you intend to use before you roll to attack. You can only use one. Unlike in shooting where you use all of them, in melee you only use one. And then you proceed with your attacks in much the same fashion as you would when you were shooting. You choose a target for each of your attacking models, and you can split attacks of a particular weapon to various units. In shooting, you could not, but in melee, you can. And you can split attacks from multiple models to various units. Just make sure you declare exactly who is attacking whom and how many attacks are going where before you roll your dice. Everyone has to be clear on that. The number of attacks each model has is equal to the attack's characteristic of the weapon. You successfully hit the target for each result that is equal to or greater than the weapon skill characteristic of the weapon. Take away your fails and roll all your successes now to see if you wound the target, comparing the strength of your weapon with the toughness of the target. Let's look at the wound roll table again to recall what dice you need to roll to succeed. If the strength of your weapon is twice or more than twice the target's toughness, you wound on 2+. If the strength is greater but not double the toughness, you wound on 3+. If the strength equals the toughness, you wound on 4+. If the strength is less but not half the toughness, you wound on 5+. And if the strength is half or less than half the toughness, you wound on 6+. If you roll any successful wounds, your opponent must allocate those successful attacks to the models in the target unit as they choose, but they must choose wounded models and models already attacked that phase first. In addition, even if the allocated model within the unit isn't currently visible or within engagement range of the model that made the attack, as long as it was part of the unit that was originally targeted, the model can still be chosen. Following that, your opponent will roll a saving throw against each attack, needing to match or beat model's saving throw characteristic, adjusting for your weapon's armor penetration. Invulnerable saves can be applied here as well, so be sure to keep them in mind when facing anything with a nasty armor penetration. If any of the saves were failed, inflict damage equal to the damage characteristic of the weapon for each successful hit. A model is destroyed and removed from play if the number of wounds inflicted in total on that model equals its wounds characteristic. Any excess damage is lost. And finally, after the unit has made all of the attacks that it can, it will now consolidate, meaning you can move each model in the unit that isn't already base to base with an enemy model up to another 3 inches. They have to end this consolidation move within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units while still maintaining unit coherency. If they can meet these conditions, then each of the models has to end closer to the closest enemy model than they were, and if possible, within base-to-base contact with 1 or more enemy models. If they can't do that, if maybe the attacking unit destroyed the last enemy unit within engagement range, it can instead make its consolidation move towards the closest objective marker, but only if the consolidation move would put that unit within range of that objective marker, and that would be within 3 inches horizontally or 5 inches vertically, while still being in unit coherency. If you can't do that either, if everything is just too far away, then you can't make the consolidation move and that unit stays where it is and is considered finished fighting, and the next unit can begin fighting. Let's put what we learned to practice. Right, here we have a game of Chaos Demons versus Adeptus Mechanicus. We have 1 unit of Flesh Hounds, 1 unit of Cerberus Sulphur Hounds, and 1 Onagardoon Crawler. Since these guys have charged, they get the fight first ability, so they're going to go in the fight first step, and these guys will go in the remaining combat step. So the first thing in the fight phase is to pile in. If the models aren't already in base-to-base contact with an enemy, these 4 up here are already in base-to-base contact. This one is not, so I'll move it to be in base-to-base contact with the closest enemy model. These guys I could move, but they're already in base-to-base contact with people who are in base-to-base contact, so I'm content to leave them there. They do not need to move. And there really is no way to carefully put them closer, so we're good there. Now, the Flesh Hounds are all going to attack with gore-drenched fangs on the Sulphur Hounds. Gore-drenched fangs have 3 attacks per Flesh Hound. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. And we're hitting on 3s. Alright, taking out my fails. Push these so you can see. Taking out my fails. And now their strength for those are 5. The toughness is 4, so I hit on 3s. Or I wound on 3s, I mean. Girls. And we've got fail, fail, fail. Wounding on 3s, yeah. Fangs have a -1 AP. So normally they save on 4s, but right now they're going to save on 5s because of that -1 AP. 5 plus. We are going to actually keep the fails this time so that we can assign them. So we have lots of fails. It's going to be a fair bit of damage. None of these guys are wounded, so I can apply them as I like. And I have to apply them 1 at a time, basically. Each Sulphur Hound has 2 wounds, so the first one is going to be applied, which will wound that guy, and then because he's wounded, he has to have the next one applied, so that's going to take out 1 guy. I'm going to take out you. And then we have another one taken out. You. Another one taken out. You. Another one taken out. You. And then there's 1 wound left to go onto my alpha. I left the alpha since he's a little bit more powerful. And then these guys will consolidate, which means if they're not base to base with an enemy model, they will move to be so to the closest enemy model. And even if they can't get in within range of base to base, they have to come at least closer than they started. Now, the alpha has a maul and clawed limbs. I normally have to choose one or the other to fight with, but the cavalry arc maul has 3 abilities. The first one is anti-vehicle 4+. That's not really relevant to this one because he's not fighting against a vehicle. If he were fighting against a vehicle, his critical wounds would be on 4+. Critical wounds, if you recall, automatically wound when they succeed. He also has devastating wounds ability, which means that he deals mortal wounds instead of regular wounds. And the attack sequence ends, he doesn't have to roll any further, doesn't have to save. So let's just step away from the combat for a moment to talk about mortal wounds. Some attacks inflict mortal wounds, and each mortal wound inflicts 1 point of damage on a target, applied one at a time, just like you would a regular wound. But you do not roll a wound roll or a saving throw against mortal wounds, including any invulnerable saves. You just allocate and inflict the damage as you would with any other wound. But unlike damage inflicted by normal attacks, excess damage from mortal wounds is not lost and is instead allocated to another model in the unit. It splashes over from one model to the next until all the mortal wounds have been allocated or all models in the unit have been destroyed. If there comes a point where an attack inflicts mortal wounds in addition to any normal damage, you resolve the normal damage first and then inflict any mortal wounds remaining. Even if the attack is saved and no normal damage is done, the target will still be inflicted by mortal wounds. There are ways to avoid them, and you can heal damage dealt by mortal wounds, but the fact that they can splash from one model to another and that they can't be saved against makes them quite dangerous, and you'll see them often in 40k. Okay, back to our combat. And then his final ability is extra attacks. Rather important, it means that he can use his clawed limbs and the arc maul. So he's going to get both. I'll just do the arc maul first, which is 2 attacks, 4+ to hit, and 3s to wound. No wounds, and then we'll go ahead with his clawed limbs, 4s, and 4s again. No AP, but their save is 7+, so they can't save. However, they have their invuln saves, so they will roll, and both are fails, 1 damage each, so we get to take 1 out. She'll read this one. And then he could consolidate, but he's already base to base. When it was on their turn, I would retreat him out so he could fire in and do an awful lot of damage, since between the two of them, he's the better firer, and then he would charge on in and see if he could take them out. But that will be for another lesson. Mission number 4, take them out. This mission will simply practice everything we've learned so far. Your movement, your shooting, your charging, and your fighting. In the center of the battlefield, arrange terrain however you see fit. Make it look good and make it so that you have to go over it and around it and such. Okay, so after your terrain is set up, measure from the battlefield edge up 6 inches. Deploy 2 to 4 units that you'd like to play wholly within the 6 inches of that battlefield edge. That is your deployment zone. If you're playing against an opponent, then your opponent's deployment zone is 6 inches from the battlefield edge opposite of yours. You can easily change up this mission and how it will feel by, instead of deploying along these edges, you could deploy along those edges. The distance you start off from enemy models will really matter whether you're shooting or melee focused. I suggest doing both to see how it plays out differently. If you don't have an opponent, just use 2 or 4 other units in your own army as your proxy opponent for this mission. Just make sure you check your points for the units and match them up so that both armies play with roughly the same amount. The way to win the game is to gather the most victory points. To earn a victory point, you have to destroy an enemy unit while in hand-to-hand combat with them. I do not care if one side is terrible in hand-to-hand combat. This is a learning lesson for the fight phase. And you can always shoot to pieces each unit until there's only one model left standing if you have to. But ultimately, the last man of each unit has to be taken out in hand-to-hand combat for you to gain a victory point for destroying it. That is the only way to win. If you get too trigger happy and kill the unit from a distance, you don't get your victory point. So at the end of 5 battle rounds, whoever gets the most victory points wins. Now, fight! Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make certain to like, subscribe to the channel if you did, and I will catch you in the next video. Make certain to comment below if you had any questions about what you just learned, and I will see you later. Bye! Thank you very much to our patrons and YouTube members. I hope you've been enjoying this series, and I hope you also have a fantastic summer, because mine's just started and I love it. When I have one of these in my hands, the only thing that goes through my mind is... Just me? Just me? Okay.